Okay, so now let's talk about AWS KMS, which is the key management service. So anytime you hear encryption in AWS, you have to think about KMS, obviously, and it's a way to easily control access to our data, and AWS will manage the encryption keys for us. It's fully integrated with IAM for authorization and has seamless integrations into all the AWS services pretty much. So EBS, S3, Redshift, RDS, SSM, etc., etc. We can use the CLI or the SDK to interact with KMS. So in KMS, you have two types of key. You have the symmetric keys and the asymmetric keys. So the symmetric keys were the first offering of KMS. It's a single encryption key that will be used to encrypt and decrypt information. And then all the services that are integrated with AWS KMS use symmetric KMS keys. It's necessary if you want to do envelope encryption, and you never actually get access to the KMS key itself or unencrypted. You must just send data into KMS with a KMS API call to use it. Now, the asymmetric key are new and they can allow you to have two kind of public keys. It's a key pair, so it's a public key and a private key. The public key will be used to encrypt and the private key will be used to decrypt. Now, this is very helpful when you want to have encrypt, decrypt, or sign verify operations, and you can download the public key. That means that you can encrypt stuff from anywhere with the public key, and you can send the public key to people that you don't trust in untrusted environments. But once the data is encrypted with the public key, only the private key has the power to decrypt your information. You still cannot use the private key unencrypted though, you have to use the KMS API calls. So the use case for an asymmetric key is to have encryptions outside of AWS by users who cannot directly call the KMS API for whatever reason. Now you have different types of KMS keys. The first type is a customer managed key. And this is a key you create directly in KMS, so you can create, manage, and use them. You can enable, disable them. You can enable a rotation policy to rotate the key every year, while the old key is still preserved, of course. And you can add a key policy, which is a resource policy for KMS keys, and you can audit the key usage in CloudTrail. This is the kind of keys you will leverage for envelope encryption. So these are the kind of keys that you manage yourself. Therefore, they're called customer managed keys. But a second kind of key is the AWS managed keys. So these ones are used exclusively by AWS services such as AWS/S3, AWS/EBS, and so on. And this is what you see in the UI when you use the AWS managed keys. So they are managed by AWS and they're automatically rotated every year. You can view the key policy and you can audit in CloudTrail, but you cannot leverage them for your own encryption operations. And finally, you have AWS-owned keys, and these are created and managed by AWS, used by some services to protect your resources, and they can be used across multiple AWS accounts, but they're not in your accounts. They're used by AWS internally, and you cannot view, use, track, or audit these keys, but AWS tells you that these keys actually exist. Okay, so now if we want to have a summary of the different types of KMS keys, for the customer managed keys, you can manage metadata, you can view metadata, and you can manage it, and you can also use for your accounts, and you can have an automatic rotation every 1 year. The AWS managed key can be used in your accounts, okay? But you cannot manage them and they're required to be rotated every 1 year. This is automatic. And then the owned keys, you just know they exist, but you cannot use them or see them. Okay, now how do you create a KMS key? So you have what's called a key material origin. And it cannot be changed after creation, so you have to define it at creation time. So you have the KMS, which is the AWS KMS key material, that means that you are going to have KMS automatically create, generate, and manage the key in its own key store. This is what happens when you go into KMS and start to create a key. But you have a second option called external. In that case, well, you import the key material directly into the KMS key, and you are responsible for securing and managing this key material outside of AWS, okay? So maybe you just want to create it outside and then import it into this KMS and then be done and delete it on your end. Or you just want to keep a copy in KMS and therefore you're responsible obviously for the copy outside of KMS. Now, the last option is to use a custom key store called AWS Cloud HSM. And this allows you to create the key material directly within your HSM cluster and manage the key material there. So let's consider how it works when you have a custom key store which is backed by Cloud HSM. So you create your Cloud HSM cluster as a custom key store, and there is a direct integration with KMS. That means that when KMS creates key, well, the key materials are going to be stored in your HSM cluster that you own and manage. That means that the keys live within your HSM cluster they are only managed by KMS and used by KMS. And all the cryptographic operations will be directly performed in the HSMs, okay? So this is the architecture. You have your Cloud HSM cluster with two AZs, and it is directly connected to KMS. So once you have at least two HSM for high availability, then you can integrate with KMS, and then the users can still use the KMS API to view, create, and manage keys. But behind the scenes, you know for sure that KMS will be using your Cloud HSM cluster for all the cryptographic operations and for storing and retrieving these keys. So why would you do this? Well, the use cases is that you need to have direct control over the HSMs for higher security, or for security requirements at least, or you have a requirement to store the KMS keys in a dedicated HSM environment. Now, if you choose to have an external KMS key source, then you can bring your own key using your own key material. And you are really going to be responsible for the key's material security, availability, and durability outside of AWS. So it must be a 256-bit symmetric key, so you cannot import asymmetric material for now. And it cannot be used with custom key store. It has to be used on its own. For this, if you want to have KMS key rotation, of course, because the key source is external, then you have to rotate it on your own. So automatic rotation is not supported. So how does that work? Well, the user will create a KMS key in KMS and say that it's a symmetric type of key and that the source is external. Now the key envelope is created, but the key material is not. So then you download the public key and an import token, and you're going to use the public key with your internal, your externally generated key material to create an encryption thanks to the public key. Now this public key, this private key that has been encrypted can be sent back to the KMS service using also the import token, and then KMS will use some decryption mechanism to get the key material and store it in your KMS key in there. So this is the process to import external keys in KMS. Okay. Lastly, so you need to know about KMS multi-region keys. So it's possible for you to create a key, for example, in US East 1 and have it replicated across multiple regions. So they will have the same key material and actually the same key ID, but they will be in different regions. So the use cases are amazing because thanks to this, well, you have the same key in multiple regions, and that means that you can encrypt in one region and decrypt in the other regions using the same KMS key ID. So you don't need to re-encrypt data or make cross-region API calls. So they will have the same key ID, the same key material, the same automatic rotation, and so on. But these keys are not global keys, okay? It's this principle that there is a primary key in one region and all the others are replicas. Each key can be managed independently, and although you can only have one primary key at a time, it's possible for you to promote one replica into their own primary key. So the use cases for multi-region keys is going to be disaster recovery, global data management, for example, for DynamoDB global tables, active-active applications that span multiple regions, or distributing, signing applications, and so on. So that's it for this lecture. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture.